In this video, I want to talk about lessons 3.01 through 3.04 for English 7B. So to begin, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I want to just walk you through the things to keep in mind as you're working through these lessons. So in these lessons, you're reading three personal narratives. The first one is titled Homesick. And in Homesick, you're going to read it the first time. You're going to look at word choice and interactions, viewpoints of people in the personal narrative. And then in 3.02, you'll continue reading Homesick Part 2, and you'll look at the author's purpose, position, understanding the context of when this was written, and looking at cultural identity. That is the first personal narrative you're reading in this module. The second one is called Mommy and Poppy, and that is a shorter personal narrative that you'll read in lesson 3.03. And in this one, you're going to look at imagery, character, conflict, word choice, interactions, and evidence. Remember, it's really important that you're going through every single page in your lessons to make sure you're preparing before reading, during reading, and working on your learn activity. Okay, then in lesson 3.04, you're reading another personal narrative, and that one's titled The Night the Bed Fell. This is another personal narrative. Again, you're writing a personal narrative in lesson 3.08. So let these three personal narratives that you're reading serve as an example of what will be expected of you when you write your own personal narrative as a graded assignment in lesson 3.08. Again, make sure you're going through all of the pages and completing the quizzes. There's a quiz in lesson 3.02 and a quiz in lesson 3.04. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to highlight some things to keep in mind as you're working through your lessons. I want to analyze some of this for you. Let me go ahead and share my screen so you can see this. All right. So, here are some things to keep in mind as you're working through these three personal narratives. So, firstly, we're going to analyze some of these excerpts from these stories. And so that way you have a purpose for your reading. So, as you're reading, I want you to think about these things. So, the first one is an excerpt from Homesick. Okay, so here it is. The skeleton of a large junk, its ribs lying bare, its backbone running straight and true down the bottom. This is asking for you to think about the figurative language that's being used here. Okay. In this excerpt, what does it tell the readers? It tells the readers that builders have only completed the frame of the junk. So I want you to keep in mind as you're reading this in lesson 3.01 and 3.2, when you come across this in the reading, think about what that meaning of this figurative language here from this excerpt means. The second one I want you to keep in mind is this excerpt from Homesick. I was looking up at a white cloud skittering across the sky when all at once someone tramped down hard on my right foot. Ian Forbes, snarling bulldog face. What does the figurative language in this excerpt tell the readers about Ian Forbes? He wants to scare the narrator. And how does he want to do that? I think this right here gives us a really good clue. Snarling bulldog face. You know, I imagine a bulldog. Some little kids are scared of bulldogs. Maybe even adults are scared of bulldogs. So it's asking, what does Ian Forbes mean by this use of figurative language by the narrator? And this third example is also from Homesick. Chinese words don't march across flat surfaces the way ours do. They drop down cliffs, and one cliff after another from right to left across a page. What does the figurative language in this excerpt tell the readers about Chinese words? Well, it tells us that Chinese is written in columns instead of horizontal lines. So this imagery here, if you reread this, you can see that the Chinese words are written in columns and instead of horizontal lines like in English. Okay. There's some other things to keep in mind as you're reading. I want you to pay attention to word choice. So think about, how does the word choice in sentences affect the meaning of the text? So there's two excerpts I want you to keep in mind as you're reading. One, I could put my finger on the exact spot where I was and had been since I'd been born, and I was on the wrong side of the globe. What does the author mean by I was on the wrong side of the globe? Well, it reveals that the narrator, and this is from the personal narrative Homesick, reveals that the narrative would prefer to live somewhere else. Okay. So, some people say I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, how does that impact the meaning of what they're trying to say? And the next one, I kept my mouth locked tight against the King of England. What does that mean? What does that mean, locked tight against the King of England? Is that literal? No, she didn't literally do that. It's figurative. And it shows how determined the narrator is not to sing the anthem. And you might be wondering, if you're watching this video, before you read what it is we're referring to, as you read, keep that in mind when the author uses that word. What is it meaning? What's the context of what's going on? Okay, the other thing I want you to keep in mind in these lessons 3.1 through 3.4 is conflict. Now, you can pause this video and read these excerpts for yourself, but I want you to keep in mind which of these three excerpts have to do with individual versus individual. That's the conflict when it's two characters going against one another. There's a conflict between characters. You have one individual, they're conflicting with another individual. The other type of conflict we have is individual versus self. That's when an individual, a character, is having a conflict with themselves. It might be an interior conflict, they're wrestling with something themselves. And the other type of a conflict I want you to keep in mind in these excerpts is individual versus nature, or sometimes it would say individual versus society. But this would be when a character is having a conflict or a problem with nature, maybe an outside force like weather, or something bad happened to their bicycle or their car. Okay, so keep those in mind. If you want to, you can pause to read these excerpts to figure out which one is which conflict. There's actually different ones for each one. Okay, and lastly, I want to talk about tone. Okay, a lot of students say, what is tone? Okay, tone is the way that the author or the person narrating feels at the moment, or feels in the personal narrative or in the story. Um, so keep in mind, what is the feeling or emotion that is provoked from what's going on in the story? It's not how you feel. So if you're feeling scared or if you're feeling sad, that's mood. Okay. Mood is how you, the reader, feels. Okay. Tone is the tone that the piece of writing is giving off. So it might give a sense of relief, or it might give a sense of humor. Okay. So keep those in mind. Tone is something you also will be assessed on at the end of those lessons. So that's an overview for lessons 3.1 through 3.4 for English 7B. I hope it's helpful. Good luck working through your lesson pages, your readings, your quizzes. Let me know, Mrs. Alexander, if you need any help with anything. I'd be happy to assist.